surrendering provides us with a state of softening. When we soften, we let go of our boundaries and belief systems that life is supposed to be any other way. Because the truth is, no one ever said that life was going to be fair. And that was a hard pill for me to definitely swallow. I was like a social justice warrior. And I'm like, that's not fair. It's like, who said that life would be fair? Who determines what fairness is? How do we really know what fairness is when we don't see everything happening on a cosmic level? We don't know all of the karma. We don't know the past lives. And we don't know what that dark night of the soul might lead you to.
Trust flows, surrender, let go. Trust flows, surrender, let go. Trust flows, surrender, let go. I'm the one I've been waiting for.
And before we get into this conversation, I would love if you would hit subscribe on this podcast. This is the best way for you to stay tuned on future episodes, and it helps raise the vibration of the planet. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, hit subscribe and we'll keep the good juju flowing. Do you hear the song playing in the background? That's my voice. Yes, my new song, Be the Vibe, is now out. This song really shares my story of overcoming my divorce and awakening the goddess in me and remembering who I used to be, letting go of the adversity and tuning into simplicity, because this life was meant to be free. Those are some of the lyrics. And, for me, my musical journey has been majorly stepping into my voice. Like growing up, I was always told, oh, you're such a bad singer, don't sing. And I just never felt comfortable in that medium, but I've always been very musical. I was a dancer, I was a pianist, and it just feels so good coming back home into production. I produce all of these songs as well as write, sing, and soon to be rapping in them as well. So you can stream Be the Vibe wherever you listen to music, on Spotify, on Apple. This is the perfect song to just get you in the zone, whether you're taking your hot girl walk or you're relaxing during the holidays, or you just need a little morning pick me up to get your mind in the right vibe. This song is for you. So you can find the link in the show notes. And I'm so excited to share a piece of my heart with you. Welcome back to the High Self Podcast. My name is Sahara Rose, and on this podcast, I love to take spiritual concepts and make them modern, fun, grounded, real, relatable, so they can actually serve your needs. And I've been doing this podcast for 7+ years, and what I love to do on these solo casts is share the spiritual messages that I have been receiving in my own life. And for those of you that are new to this podcast, the past year now has been the most transformational of my life so far. So last December, I got divorced. I was in that relationship for 7 years, and it was the most confronting, liberating, and soul-shaking thing of my entire life, to say the least. I thought I was going to be on a certain pathway of life. I thought I knew the person I was going to be with forever. And, there were things I was, of course, excited about. I was already DJing and doing things that I loved. I had amazing friends, but also my life was a bit monotonous. That's how life becomes. I wasn't really expecting anything different, right? I would say I had a good life, but was I living my optimal full expression? Well, I can see now based on the past year, no, I was not. So after that happened, it really just rocked me to my core. So it got me to really start to ask myself these big existential questions that I would have never asked myself before. What do I really want in this lifetime? And before, when I would ask myself that, I could only see my life with him. I had this vision for myself that one day I would live in Bali, I would live in the jungle, I would be with community. But that's not what he wanted. So I was okay with never having that be my reality. And once I was out of that relationship, I started to realize that I can just fully live for me, and not just in where I want to live, but who I want to be. So this moment was a dark night of the soul, which led to me being in the void. So a dark night of the soul, you've probably heard this before, is when your life you thought was going one direction, you're on cruise control, you think you know what you're doing. So it might have been you're in a relationship, it might have been that you're in a job, it might have been that you're operating from a certain belief system, and all of a sudden it gets shattered. So it might be for you getting fired, your company going bankrupt, an unexpected divorce, a crisis happening, losing a family member, something big that causes you to really question everything. And when these moments are happening, it feels like our biggest nightmare is happening right now. It feels like the world is against us. But what I have found, and not just me, but anyone that's gone through a dark night of the soul, is that it ends up being the best thing that has ever happened for you. And the reason why is because it's taken you out of cruise control, out of this unquestioned way of living. And in that questioning, though, comes the confusion, but then comes the clarity because you're actually living in alignment with your truth rather than taking the default of whatever situation that you were in. So with this dark night of the soul, we're often confronted with the very thing that we never wanted to happen. And often it's things that you wouldn't have even thought about were possible. Maybe you have a really big business and it's successful, you have employees and it's all going well. And then all of a sudden something happens unexpectedly and you lose your company. Or you're in a relationship and you think it's going well and you learn that you have been being cheated on. Or you have a family member and they're healthy and well, and all of a sudden they get cancer and within a few months pass away. These are very real things that happen. And while it can be scary, because we never know what's around the corner, when we overcome these things, it shows ourselves how resilient and adaptable we are, and that we can actually take these losses and create a life that is truer and more in alignment with ourselves, should we choose it. So for me, this brought me into the pathway of trust. Trusting that there was something greater than me that had my best interest at heart. Call it the universe, call it God, call it spirit, whatever you want. I was just trusting that it can only get better from here. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I am going to take this situation that I'm in and use it as the fertile soil for me to become the version of me that I never believed was possible. And I didn't fully even know what that looked like. I didn't know like, okay, and this is who I really want to be. And I've been holding myself back. I didn't know, but I just knew when something big like this happens, it creates ripple effects on every single decision you make for the rest of your life. And I was going to quantum leap into whoever I was meant to be in this lifetime that I was unaware of. So I just started really listening to the guidance of where I was meant to first go next. So for me, travel has been a huge part of my spiritual pathway of like actually going places that give me activations and recalibrations based on that place. So I first ended up in Egypt, receiving a lot of the wisdom from the hieroglyphics that literally began communicating and speaking to me, working with the Egyptian Neteru, the deities of that land. It then brought me to Bali, where I started to go very deep into the womb, into the healing, into the emoting, which again, I had no idea at this time that I was later creating my method, the Triple E method, Emote, Embody, and Express, that later my embodiment certification at Highest Self Institute would be on. I was just in the mystery school of not knowing and needing to figure out how I was going to heal from this thing. So the traveling started to give me different codes that I needed for my healing, each place carrying a different significance. Next, I was in Trinidad, where I started to tune into my expression and my liberation and, wearing these like sexy carnival outfits and like dancing on the streets. Like I had never experienced such liberation in my lifetime before. And then going deep into inner child and ancestral healing in Sedona and working with plant medicine and beginning my relationship with the plants, which was something that I had toyed around with, but never fully. And wow, recognizing all of the deep ancestral and inner child healing that needed to really happen for, first of all, that was the reason how I was even in that relationship, and that this was the opportunity for me to look into. So from there, of doing a lot of shadow work, months and months of deep shadow work. I mean, I cried more than I ever have this year in my entire life, for sure. But then in these vulnerable moments, I started to just really listen. I started to hear music in a deeper way. I started to hear frequencies and layers and people's voices and the little deflections in their voice, I just became so much more conscious, right? So much more sensitive. Like when I would meet someone, I would feel their energy so much more. When someone would even say something sad, I could feel, like physically feel it. Like my sense of empathy had heightened to such a level. And I've always been an empath, but now it was like, oh my God, I feel everything. And so while I cried more, I laughed more than ever before. I felt more love than ever before. I felt more alive than ever before. And even if that was all I gained from this experience, that in itself would have been so worth it. To feel more alive. Because that is really why we're here. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So New Year's is a time of a lot of pressure. Sometimes we're like, I need to lose a certain amount of weight or make this much money. And we can be really hard on ourselves. So that's why it's really important to have a therapist where you can share what your actual goals are. A long time ago, I switched from making New Year's resolutions to New Year's intentions. And I feel like sitting with a therapist and really talking that through would be such a powerful way to start off your year. This way, you're creating a year around who you want to be rather than who society tells you to be. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, I highly recommend giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched to a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Sahara today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Sahara, and you can find that link in the show notes. So as I'm going through this journey and, so many layers of grief, of anger, of disgust, of all of the things that are underneath the surface, there were many times that I'm like, does this ever end? Like, am I ever going to reach a day that I stop crying? Am I ever going to reach a day that I stop trying to figure out what happened or stop constantly analyzing and processing and needing to heal? It felt like, is this just my eternity? Have you ever felt like that? And I will say that there does reach a day that the tears stop. And there does reach a day where you stop trying to make sense of everything and you start to realize that if I could understand why someone would do something fully, I would be them, and I'm not. Like, I can't understand why there is war. I can't understand why there is murder and rape and injustice. I'm not meant to understand that. And some things you will never understand, but you can just have compassion. And so, really first 6 months was a lot of that deep healing work. And from that place, I finally felt ready to spread my wings and to live a life that I could have never lived before in the marriage. So in June, I headed off. I put all my things in storage and I headed off to Portugal. And I've been in Europe ever since, and the journey continues. But going to Portugal, I went to this festival called Afro Nation, which is this amazing Afrobeats festival. I love Afrobeats music. It's like my soul's language. And I'm just connecting more and more with the music and the culture and the frequency. And then I start channeling the music myself. I start writing melodies and coming up with drums and coming up with lyrics. And it was like those tender moments of deep grief where I was like listening to the Afro music so intently. It was preparing me to then create it on the other side. So this summer I start producing music and start learning about it. And it was like my soul's language that it was like my lifetime I had been preparing for it, but I had never actually like prepared for it. Do you know what I mean? And so I made my first song, and that first song is Divane, which is now out, using instruments from where my mom is from the south of Iran. So these like tribal Persian instruments with Afro house music. And then my next song, Trust Flow, which is a mantra that I kept repeating to myself this year: trust, flow, surrender, let go. Trusting the divine plan, trusting that this is happening for my greatest good, trusting that things will only get better. Being in the flow of life, the flow of creativity, the flow of this journey that we never really know where it's taking us, and noticing the signs and synchronicities, which are little winks that you're on the right pathway. Surrendering. I never fully understood what the word surrender meant before. I remember someone told me they were writing a book on surrender a few years ago. And I told them, I was like, I'm having a hard time understanding that, because for me, surrender feels like complacency. It feels like just letting whatever happen. And for me, my life has been around like breaking free from the conditioning and the narrative that I was meant to be on, and having the courage to step into my own path. It hasn't been the path of surrender. And she didn't really have the words to explain it. She was like, oh, I don't know. It's just a word that resonates with me. And now I understand. Because when things like this happen that are out of our control, which really is so much, not just in our lives, but around the world, you have no choice but to surrender. And it's when you surrender and you stop fighting what is, that you start to recognize the gift in it. Surrendering provides us with a state of softening. When we soften, we let go of our boundaries and belief systems that life is supposed to be any other way. Because the truth is, no one ever said that life was going to be fair. And that was a hard pill for me to definitely swallow. I was like a social justice warrior, and I'm like, that's not fair. It's like, who said that life would be fair? Who determines what fairness is? How do we really know what fairness is when we don't see everything happening on a cosmic level? We don't know all of the karma. We don't know the past lives, and we don't know what that dark night of the soul might lead you to, right? So for me, when I was in my divorce, I felt unfair. It felt like an act of injustice, an act of betrayal. So much just like hurt. And now I can see even through that, even if the actions were wrong, from a moral stance, it ended up still being the best thing that had ever happened to me, because it set me free. And that's what surrender provides us with. It allows us to put down our wall, put down our sword, open our hearts up, and just receive and say, this is happening right now, and guide me, lead me. And I've shared a song that I would continue to listen to on the podcast with Blue, Spirit Lead Me. And I would just sing that song to myself again and again, which led me to the trust, flow, surrender, let go mantra. And God would just take me from one place to the next, one person to the next, one realization to the next. And for me, especially stepping into my artistry has been the biggest gift of this year. And it's definitely not what I saw coming at all. I never thought I would be like a singer-rapper. And here I am dropping an album on March 8th on Women's Day with my music that I've produced, written, recorded, channeling all these different expressions of myself. But I didn't have the vision for it. I just surrendered. And I surrendered to listening to the music. I surrendered going to Portugal, going to Afro Nation, starting to produce the music, meeting different people who opened up different sides of my voice, just even watching how they would do their artistry, each person carrying a unique code for me. And then this album birthing through me. And who knows where the journey will take me. And it's funny because in February when I was in Trinidad, this was the first time I smoked weed in maybe like 10 years. I've never been a weed smoker. It always made me anxious. But I was like, you know what? I'm in Trinidad, land of the Rastafarians. Like, let's try it. And I just went into the deepest meditation of my life, and I saw my future self. And she was this like eclectic woman with like all these like colors, like Frida Kahlo vibes. And she had like short white hair, and she lived in this like beautiful pagoda house in Costa Rica, and she had her family around her, and she was just so confident, And one of the things that she told me was that in the future, your books are going to be albums, and they're going to be transmissions of frequency. So instead of like writing a book about sensuality, of like how to be more sensual, step by step, here's the lessons, do this action point, it's going to be an album with the transmission of sensuality. So when I received that, I thought, oh, maybe like in 10 years from now, because I don't know how to produce music. Like I always felt like it's this really hard thing. And that happened months later. Literally, that was February. And then in July, that's when the codes of the music started to come on. Not that I set out for like, I'm going to learn, but rather I remained in a state of trust, flow, surrender, and let go. Let go of the beliefs that I'm not ready. Let go of the narrative that, oh, this thing is too masculine, this thing is too hard, I'm not, whatever the story is. And like also letting go of the past and letting go of the hurt and letting go of the sadness. And the only way we can let go is to feel it first, to feel that thing that you're holding on to, emote it, embody it, move it through your body and express it into art. And that's really the full transmutation process of like taking that muck into lotus, taking the bronze into gold. This is what alchemy is, which is what every spiritual tradition talks about. Your greatest gifts will always come from your greatest burdens. And it's funny because I used to be like, how can we create a life of all heaven on earth and all joy all the time? And, before my divorce, I was even writing this book on joy, like for 2 years. I kept writing it and then being like, I don't know, I feel like there's like something more to it. Like, I feel like it's not as simple as like doing a joy practice and focusing on joy. Like that's what the general public say, but I'm like, no, really, why aren't we joyful? And now I've recognized that the only way that we can experience joy is through grief. Like the only way we can experience joy is to know what we fear, to know what's underneath that hood of the car. And it's like not what our egos want. We like want all happiness all the time, but it actually doesn't exist because it wouldn't taste like happiness anymore. Right? Like if I only had one flavor all the time, if I only had like moderate spice, well, soon moderate spice isn't even going to taste like moderate spice anymore. It's just going to taste neutral. So if I only experience what I call happiness, that just becomes my neutral point. It's not even happiness anymore. So we need to experience the range, the spectrum, because that duality is what makes us feel. And ultimately, we are here to feel. That's what the human experience is. We are here to feel the joy, the connection, the ecstasy, and the bliss. And we can only feel those things when we actually have the courage to feel what's underneath the hood of the car, which, by the way, it won't last forever, but new waves come in. It's not a one-time process. And I believe the reason why so many people are numb is because they avoid feeling those things. And I would say there is this massive epidemic right now, especially with the men, because the men do have a harder time feeling. Like naturally, biologically, they're more disconnected from their hearts, but also societally with conditioning, don't cry, be strong. That's why so many of the men, it's like they're numb. So there's such addiction happening right now with the jewel and the vape pen, with pornography, with sex. And when the men are stuck in this addiction, they're not stepping into their full masculinity, and the women are not being met by the man. And so I'm seeing this huge, rising of the feminine without the full rising of the masculine. It's happening, but it's just very much at the beginning, whereas the feminine, we've been rising for the past like 20 years now. And so I'm seeing a lot of conscious women leaving relationships where they're not being met, where they're being disrespected, where they're being betrayed, where, maybe in the past they would have stayed in those situations because of societal conditioning. And now they're saying, no more. It ends with me. And I'm also witnessing the deep feminine yearning of wanting to be in partnership and not being fully met because the men are still in this loop of not feeling the shadows. So they're numb, and then they're avoiding that feeling of numbness through addiction. So this is kind of a collective theme I've noticed right now. And I know the masculine is rising and it's going to happen and we will have sacred union in this lifetime, but right now is the time for us to do the work. So the letting go is essential part of this process, because if we're trying to like hold on to everything, hold on to the old life, hold on to this, hold on to that, and also I want to become the best version of me, it's like you can't carry all your groceries in your hand at once. What are you willing to walk away from? And sometimes when we don't have the courage to walk away from the thing, God does it for us. We get fired from the job, we lose the relationship, the friendship breakup happens. And often that's because spirit has nudged you that thing was out of alignment for quite a long time and you just weren't listening. And so it needed to blow up in your face for you to actually take action. Because you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to make a quick assumption about you. Your friends come to you for advice. whenever you're at a party, someone corners you at the side of the snack table and starts telling you all of their childhood traumas, and you actually love diving deep into spiritual topics, and you have a really good way of communicating with people. So the best way to actually create a career doing this is through coaching. But I know a lot of people, they're like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what type of coach I would be. So I've created a quick, easy quiz to discover your unique coaching style. So there are 3 categories: the intuitive, transformational, or empathetic coach. So the intuitive one really works with your intuition. You're able to receive downloads. You just have insights about people. The transformational one has more of that fire energy. You love to keep it real and help people go through the deepest phoenix rising from the ashes moments in their lives. And the empathetic coach really loves to listen, hold space. They're very grounded, nurturing. So if you're curious which type you are, you can try my free quiz at quiz.highestselfinstitute.com. Again, that's quiz.highestselfinstitute.com, which is my school that certifies spiritual life coaches. And you can find that link in the show notes. I'm super excited to see what type of coach you are, because I'm gonna hire you one day.
So trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance, close your eyes and listen.
So this year, through this mantra of trust, flow, surrender, let go, has brought me to places, to depths, to realizations, to gifts, to fun, to joy, to connection, to friendship than I have ever experienced in my life. I have changed profoundly as a human being, and I know it's just the beginning. And it's funny because I used to think like you either learn lessons through like your purpose or through love. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to learn my lessons through purpose. And it's like, no, bitch, you're going to do both. I think there's different time periods. And I would say learning lessons through love has been the most powerful, because love is who we are. You know, we really are love embodied, and we only often experience love through another. So when we depart from relationship, it feels like I'm separate from love. And I just want to go back to that state. And I want to do a whole podcast about, maybe I'll do that next, about like being single and how often we just want to go back to that state of love, that we're willing to just like cling on to whatever is familiar to us. And then we end up repeating those cycles and patterns. And I've noticed in myself, being completely single this year, completely in my celibacy, completely in my own practice, loving and dating and being with myself, that I'm healing things within myself without having to go into a relationship to heal it, right? I don't need to go and spend 2 years with someone to learn the self-worth thing. It's like I'm learning that within myself, and I'm quantum leaping within myself so deeply that I'm preparing myself for a partnership where, of course, there's always going to be deeper levels of healing, but it's not like I'm going from the baseline of where I left it. And I feel that so many of us do that when we leave relationship. We just want to go back into love, you know? So we leave that relationship, we instantly go on the apps, instantly call up the exes, instantly try to just like go to someone else. And then wherever you were on that level of consciousness is how you enter into the new relationship. So then whatever cycles, lessons, karma has not been completed, you're just going to repeat that in the next one and the next one. And I've noticed like month by month, even like who I'm attracted to changes so much. And I tell my friends, I make these like lists on my phone of like my manifestation, and they change. They really change. And I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't get the June manifestation, because that's different than the August manifestation, which is different than the September one, different than the October one, different than the November one. So it's like, we think we know what we want, but then we do more healing, and then what we want changes, right? So it's like getting to a place where you're so clear about what you want that it's not shifting. And you know when it's shifting, that it's like, it's not yet the time when, and now I feel like I'm really at this place because it's been a full year now. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I know how I energetically want to feel in relationship. Whereas a lot of the times before, my lists were about like who the person was, what they did, what they looked like aspects about their character. And those things are important, but ultimately you're in relationship with your energy with them. How you feel is your quality of your relationship with them. So for example, Rosie, you know, my best friend, her and I are super different. Right? Like she is like super kapha, Cancer, mama bear, but also was like a goth punk. And I'm like extroverted, bubbly, Capricorn, which is like literally on the opposite end of Cancer, and was like super like hip hop and stuff. So it's like we have a lot of opposite things, but our quality of our relationship is like profound. I mean, if I ever have a romantic relationship like the friendship I have with Rosie, I'm fucking golden. Like we check in on each other, we're there for each other, we listen to each other, we hold space for each other. That it doesn't matter if I wrote a list of my best ideal friend, maybe I would be like, loves dance hall music and loves soca and wants to travel around the world with me. And that's not who Rosie is. However, she's been like the best friend of my life because of the quality of our friendship. So I share this because so often we think we know what we want and it's based off of these ideas, and often the ideas are actually who we want to become. I mean, being real with you, most of this year, my attraction is to music producers. Why? Because I wanted to produce music. So I was attracted to the thing that I wanted to be. And then as I have anchored that within myself of, oh, I don't need to date someone to learn how to produce music. I've figured that out on my own. I'm embodying it and fully doing it on my own. Then it's like the attraction is gone. It's like, oh, what I actually want is someone to feel seen, heard, understood, someone who's dependable, reliable, great communication. We have fun together, we play together, and their job doesn't actually matter. Their ethnicity doesn't actually matter. Their height doesn't actually matter. It's how I feel in relationship with them. So these are realizations we only get to when we allow ourselves to unravel and unspiral, and we don't like cling. This is why I've really personally moved away from like practices of manifestation. For me, I don't call in like specific things. I don't do rituals or any spell. I don't do any of that stuff. And I have like ideas of what I'm calling in, but ultimately only God knows. And I have found that the times that I have like tried to make something happen, there's always holes in it, right? Like if I'm like, oh, I really want this thing. It's like, you might actually get the thing and then you realize why you don't need that thing. Or if you really want to date a person, you might date that person, but then you recognize why that person was not in alignment with you. So what's the point of trying to manifest something from your will when there is a higher divine plan for you that is so much greater? So now I'm like, whatever God wants, like in divine time, and I will be patient. And, I think patience is like the biggest attribute we're missing right now because we live in this Amazon, Instagram, have it your way right now world that we're like, let me manifest this thing that like manifestation has become almost like add to cart, put on wish list, buy now, express shipping. It's not how spirit works. It's not, you wouldn't want, imagine if you actually manifested everything you have tried to manifest. Like imagine every single thing you have prayed for and you wanted to manifest. Imagine if you actually had all of them. Imagine all the fuckboys you would have dated. Imagine all the shitty jobs you would have had. Imagine all the things you would have done that you probably didn't need to have done. Like, thank God that universe has blocked us from some of those things. Our spirit guides are like, no, honey, we're going to let you skip that karmic timeline. So I'm like, so then what's the point? Like, what is the point of me thinking that I know best when ultimately I could have never predicted the way that my life has gone ever. And it still continues to surprise me. So now I'm like, I'm just along for the ride. Like, I have no freaking idea. Like, I don't even know where I'm going to live. Like, I'm fully living in the surrender experiment, and I've been living in it for a year now. And it's taken me to depths that I would have never gone. And I'm also trusting that my life, the decisions I have made have set me up for this. It's not that I was like born with all this freedom. I was born from a Middle Eastern family where I was expected to get married and have kids at a young age, disowned from my family, from living my dharma. I was not born with like the privilege of freedom and my parents supporting me. Like the obstacles to my family has been like the greatest thing on my path. However, I trust my inner guidance. And my inner guidance has allowed me to make decisions that there had been times that I wanted to sign a lease back in LA to have that stability and grounding. But then I'm like, that's me going back to my old life. So I chose not to. And I chose to just like allow myself to live on the edge of my seat for as long as it took, because I recognize that the longer I stay in this void, the more I quantum leap. And the more magical life becomes, even though it's so freaking uncomfortable. And there have been so many times that I have just been like, can this all end? Like, can I just go back to certainty and stability? Like, yeah, that life was boring, but at least I like knew where I was going to live and what I was doing. But then all of a sudden I like start creating a mastermind or doing something that I would have never done. And that only comes from being in the void, because the void, it's like you're in the laundry machine of life, and So maybe you're in a place that you're like, well, I have a lease, or I have like a job, but it's like, how can you allow a little bit more of that spaciousness in your life? So if you are someone that plans things ahead, I would say break up with that. I have learned pay extra to not plan things super ahead because you don't know where you're going to be in your life, energetically, like mentally, relationally. Every time I've tried to make a plan for myself months ahead, I've ended up now having to be on the phone with the hotel or the Airbnb or the whatever, try to cancel it. So I've just learned not to do that, and to just remain open and to really be observant by who are the people I'm attracting? What are the conversations I'm having? What is life teaching me? How am I being guided? Because everything is information. Like now when I magnetize a friend, a person, anyone into my field, I'm very curious, how is this a reflection of my current state right now? Because it's never random. Because if I look back on this year of friends, people I've attracted, it's always been a reflection of something within me. And I do believe that God, the universe, has our greatest interest at heart. It wants us to succeed. It wants us to live our full expression. It wants us to live our dharmas. Because when we're living our dharmas, our soul's purposes, which is what I wrote my book, Discover Your Dharma, about, and my whole institute, Dharma Coaching Institute, is about that. But when you're living your soul's purpose, you're doing the thing that you were designed to do. You are being the solution for the world's problem that you are here to be. So by getting out of your own way, you can create the schools that you are here to create, which have the ripple effect of the students that go there and the families that are affected and their future kids. You create the healthy foods that need to be made through you that help heal people from their digestive issues. You write the books that are meant to be read and experienced by other people. You coach the people who are meant to work by you. You create the art that was meant to be experienced by you. You share the wisdom. You give the talk. You write the book. You make the podcast. You create the music. You channel the message. All of these things are here to raise the vibration of the planet. And so when you trust, flow, surrender, let go, you get to be the version of you that you were born to be. And especially in this world where there's constant chaos, constant wars happening in all parts of the world, we can feel so out of control with how we can help. And it's funny because it's like this illusion of I'm out of control, but you actually can really help by letting go of trying to cling on to these like world issues where you actually have no control and instead focusing on what can I do right now with my gifts and where I'm at and then my immediate community and create a change. And that's through living your dharma, your soul's purpose. So if you're curious about living your dharma, I highly suggest my book, Discover Your Dharma, which guides you step by step. I'll have that link in the show notes. It's available on Amazon, Audible, wherever you get your books. And I have a 21-day course as well called the 21-Day Dharma Discovery Journey. I will link that below as well. And my institute, Dharma Coaching Institute, which trains soul purpose, dharma, and spiritual life coaches. And for me, that was the biggest grounding point of my year. It was not where I lived. It was not a certain friend or a thing. It was knowing that I always had my dharma and that could never be taken away from me, And when I was in so much grief and despair and I would like come on my Dharma Coaching Institute calls and like connect back to this higher frequency and channel like my wisdom and have that be experienced by other people, I just felt so much self-love. And when I listen back to every single one of these podcasts and, I'm listening to them in a different state and often like the wisdom really helps me. And I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful that I like took the time to like record. I'm going to cry right now. I'm so grateful that I took the time to record this podcast because it's helped me. And it helps me like even like remember different aspects of my journey because you see here, it's like I'm on stage in this beautiful set and you might see me as like the person's have it all figured out. But like, that's why I even want to do the episodes like this because it allows you to see like the journey is not fucking easy, and even if you're a spiritual teacher like I was, there are things that are like happening on your periphery that you have no idea about, but you just have to trust in yourself that you will be able not just to get through anything, but that horrible thing will be the best thing that has ever happened to you because you will choose it to be. So if you're in it right now, especially in heartbreak, like I never fully understood the gravity of it before, like I would have you have friends that say, oh, I broke up with my boyfriend, or you would hear people got divorced and you're like, oh, that sucks. Like I never really thought about it, you know? And now I'm like, oh shit, it's like a literal death. I now see it as like you lost someone in your family. Because that is like how multi-layered it really is. It rocks your world. And it takes immense strength. I have so much respect. You know, I think our society, it like talks down upon divorce, like as if like, oh, the divorce rates are skyrocketing. What's wrong with people? Like they're not willing to settle and negotiate. And it's like, no, like if you're in a situation where you're being disrespected, where you are being abused, where there is toxicity, where you are being betrayed, where you are being lied to, like the most courageous thing you can do is to walk away from that situation. And if you have kids, it's showing your children to stand for themselves. And I just have so much respect because especially for the feminine, it's like we want to be loved so much. And like we want to be in love and we want to be cherished and we want to be seen. And I have so much compassion for like why someone would stay in a toxic relationship as well. Like I totally get that. And just like wherever you're at in your journey right now, first of all, I just feel you. And I just want to acknowledge the courage it takes to, you know, even listen to a podcast like this when you're in it and hear another perspective. Because I know for myself, I mean, I couldn't even like read a book or listen to a podcast for months. I just had to only listen to music because I was like transmuting so much. And then finally, when I felt ready, it's like, whew, okay. So I just want to honor you wherever you're at, whether it's heartbreak or uncertainty in your career or uncertainty with family members or your health or whatever it is. Just know that these dark nights of the soul are fertile ground for your highest metamorphosis. And to trust, flow, surrender, let go, and your dharma will always guide the way. So my book, the course, all the links, my song, all the things I mentioned are in the show notes. And just like take good care of yourself, love yourself. Like you don't have to figure it all out. It will all be shown in divine time. And then you'll look back on this stage of your life and you'll be like, whoa, like this thing led to that thing, led to that thing. And like, now I can see how it's all connected. But like right now you just don't because you're in it. And it takes you like zooming out. And then you can see all, like there's like all these moving pieces that are happening that you just don't know of. These things that like a word that you heard that later on is going to be like the word in your story that you're like, I kept hearing the word Cuba. And like Cuba guided me to my partner, or like, you know, that's like literally the story of my friend Amber. She kept hearing the word Cuba and it guided her. Long story short, her dog passed away. She had never really been able to do like long-term travel because she was taking care of her dog, 44, single her whole life. And she ended up going to Spain. She was in front of the ocean, like doing prayer, like calling in her divine partner in Barcelona. So she was like facing the sea. Ends up going to Mallorca, keeps hearing the word Cuba, 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 goes to this cafe called Cafe Cuba, meets her now husband. And where was she praying to when she was praying to the ocean? Mallorca, where she met him. So it's things like that you don't recognize when you're in it. She was just crying on the beach. But she didn't know that she was literally calling in the soul of her partner and that her dog dying is what actually like her dog's soul guided her to him. So trust that there is a beautiful story on the other side of this. Notice the synchronicities. For me, I notice when I start to go back into a state of flow, I'm noticing the numbers, the 1111, the 222, the 330. I'm hitting every single one. And when I'm not, it's like 223. I'm like, oh, what's off? And it's always when I'm like a little bit lying to myself of like, oh, that's okay. Like that doesn't really matter. I'm like gaslighting myself. It's always when I get off. So it's like when you're honest with yourself, but sometimes that honesty requires aloneness, you know? Sometimes it requires a lot of patience, always requires a lot of patience. But then you actually get the thing that you want and not like the shitty secondary version of it that you could have gotten faster, you know? So trust, flow, surrender, let go. Listen to the song, listen to the mantra, let it rock your world. And I'm so excited to see where this journey takes you. If you love this episode, please share it. Please follow this podcast. That really helps get more subscribers and allows you to stay in the flow of the episodes. And I'm so grateful to have you here in this lifetime. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Namaste.
Trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance. Close your eyes and listen. So trust your intuition, trust your inner wisdom, trust your inner guidance. Close your eyes.